you do when people don't believe your testimony or they require you to give them evidence? You know, I have seen multiple people healed of sicknesses and diseases and brokenness. And no, we didn't just run to the doctor immediately and get a test done or get an x-ray done. That'd have been great. But you know, in the moment, what we're really thinking about is how good God was to us, how good God was for that person. You know, and I've been thinking about it lately. You know, it's like some people aren't going to believe your testimony. Some people aren't going to be convinced unless you give them evidence. I'm reminded of a story in chapter 9 of John where Jesus had just healed a man who was born blind. You know, there was a whole conversation about, it's like, well, did he sin or did his parents sin that he was born blind? Well, apart from that, Jesus heals this man. Well, then the Pharisees get involved and they're a little upset because Jesus has been doing all this healing on the Sabbath. That's a no-no according to them. And so they bring this blind man before him and they're fully convinced that this guy wasn't even blind in the first place, that this is all a setup, it's all a hoax, you know, and stuff. And so they start interrogating this guy. It's like, okay, explain to us exactly what happened. Okay, and then he tells us, like, I couldn't see, he did this thing to my eyes, and now I can see. And they're like, well, you know what, you weren't even born blind in the first place. So they call his parents and they have his parents testify. And you know, they're a little nervous because there's already been a threat that, you know, that if you confess Jesus, we're gonna kick you out of the synagogue. And so they're kind of like, it's like, yeah, this is our son, and yeah, he was born blind, but you know what, he's an adult, he can answer for himself, you know. And so the Pharisees, they tell them to go away, and they turn around to this guy again and they're like, it's all right, hey, you know, tell us exactly what happened. We need the facts of how this happened, you know. And he tells them again, and they say, you know what though, this Jesus, he's a sinner because he's healing people on the Sabbath. So you know what, it can't even be real anyway because he's breaking God's law. So therefore it's not even real. We know it's not. And so they tell this man, give God glory. You know, it's like, this man is a sinner. And I love the man's response. He says, whether this Jesus is a sinner or not, all I know is I couldn't see, and now I can see. And that's something I want you to be encouraged about today is, you know what God has done in your life, whether it be salvation or healing. You know what? Maybe you don't have that evidence of that broken bone. Maybe you don't have that evidence of what it was before, but you know what happened in your life. And some things aren't even like things you can even prove in the physical because it's a mental thing, it's a spiritual thing. When you were saved, for example, for myself, there was an addiction in my life, and in that moment it was broken. I hated that thing now, had no desire for it anymore, and that was because of the power of God. And that's what I love about God is he works in ways that goes against our mind. It goes against our ideas of how things should be done. So I just want to encourage you today that if you know, it's like people are just like, well, I don't believe you. Well, guess what? You know what God has done in your life. And guess what? That healing, that salvation, that was for you because God loves you. He saw a need in your life. He saw you like those sheep who were helpless and harassed, and he wanted to be your pastor, and he took care of you. So thank God for your testimony. Thank God, and keep testifying, keep telling people, you know it's true, declare it, believe it, and God's gonna impact people's lives with that testimony because, you know, it says that your testimony has power. It has so much power that it can even overcome the devil. By the word of your testimony, by the power of Jesus, you have the victory. So I encourage you today, keep your mouth open, keep speaking the word, keep telling everyone what Jesus has done for you. Speaking of what Jesus has done for us, I love my wife's testimony and what God did in her life in just one moment. Click the video to my left and take a look, and we'll see you on the other side.